Omer had always believed that love, like wealth, could be multiplied, not divided. At 50, he was calm, composed, and well-respected in his town for being both a successful businessman and a generous family man. What most people whispered about, however, wasn't his business empire. It was his home. Omer had 4 wives, each different in nature, each carrying her own story. Zara was the first, his teenage sweetheart and the woman who'd seen him rise from a shop assistant to the owner of 3 thriving outlets. Shuista was the second, a widow he married out of compassion, or so he told himself and others. Then came Lubna, bold and ambitious, who ran his accounts and later stole his heart. Lastly, Halima, the youngest, quiet and deeply religious, entered his life during a spiritual retreat and reminded him of his mother's warmth. To outsiders, it seemed like Omer lived a dream: multiple wives, financial security, and a house that never lacked laughter. But inside, the balance he maintained was delicate. He divided his time equally, rotating nights and holidays, ensuring that none of them felt less valued. Or, at least, that's what he believed. The truth, however, was more complicated. Each woman, in her own quiet way, wanted more of his time, more of his heart, more of a future that didn't include sharing him. None of them ever voiced it out loud, not entirely, but the silences between smiles said more than words ever could. Omer's biggest fear wasn't their jealousy, it was the loneliness that waited for him in old age. His older children from Zara had moved abroad, rarely calling. The house felt fuller than ever, yet emptier in ways he couldn't explain. One cool spring morning, he received news that changed everything. First, it was Shuista, glowing and nervous, holding her medical report like a fragile gift. Then, just days later, Lubna, with shaking hands and hopeful eyes. By the end of the month, Halima and Zara followed, both unaware of the other's conditions. Omer didn't panic. In fact, he felt grateful. At 50, to be blessed not once but 4 times? He saw it as a sign, a second chance, a revival of the love he thought was slipping from his grasp. He made a decision. He would tell each one that she alone carried his legacy, that she was special, that this child was theirs alone. He thought he was preserving peace. But he didn't realize, peace built on half-truths doesn't last. And somewhere, just beneath the excitement of new life, betrayal was quietly taking root. Would the house that once held so much love be able to hold the weight of so many secrets? Omer played his part with practiced ease. With each wife, he wore a slightly different version of himself, attentive with Zara, gentle with Shuista, teasing with Lubna, and serene with Halima. Now, with the news of 4 pregnancies hanging in the air like fragile lanterns, he stepped into a performance even he hadn't prepared for. To Shuista, he whispered late at night, "You've brought light back into my life." To Lubna, he said, "You are the only one who understands me." To Zara, he held her hands and promised, "This child will bring us closer again." And with Halima, he rested his forehead against hers and murmured, "You're a blessing I never expected." Each believed she alone carried the miracle. Each felt chosen. But secrets have sharp edges. And Omer, despite his calm, began feeling the weight of his own deception. Every small gesture was calculated. Every phone call rehearsed. The joy he once embraced began to feel like a burden wrapped in silk. It started with a forgotten phone left charging in Shuista's room. A message blinked across the screen. Lubna had sent Omer an ultrasound image with the words, "Our baby already looks like you." Shuista didn't confront him. Not immediately. She needed to be sure. She began watching him more closely, tracking his visits, noting his moods, scanning his words. Zara, always quiet but sharp, noticed it too. Omer had gifted her the same gold bangles he once gave her 20 years ago. What she didn't expect was seeing identical ones on Lubna's wrist a week later. Suspicion slowly crept into their conversations, veiled barbs disguised as jokes, compliments laced with comparison. The wives didn't talk openly, but they watched each other closely. Every change in Omer's routine became a clue. Every smile he gave one of them felt like a betrayal to the others. The most painful part was how none of them wanted to be right. Each hoped it was her imagination. Each prayed her heart wasn't being played. Omer, on the other hand, remained in denial. He believed love meant telling people what they wanted to hear, and he convinced himself he was only trying to keep the peace. But in doing so, he fed 4 versions of a lie that couldn't survive under one roof. The fractures in their fragile harmony grew deeper. Then came the moment that would crack everything open. Zara walked into the hospital for a routine checkup and saw Shuista leaving the same ward with the same doctor. Their eyes locked, and in that instant, the truth was no longer avoidable. No one said a word. But silence had finally done what suspicion never could. It confirmed everything. What Omer didn't realize was this: lies told in the name of love still echo like betrayal. And now, the storm he thought he had avoided was quietly beginning to gather. The silence after Zara and Shuista's encounter at the hospital didn't last long. That evening, Zara returned home early. She sat on the edge of the bed, the ultrasound photos still folded in her purse, and stared at the floor as if searching for the right words. When Omer arrived, humming a familiar tune and carrying a small gift bag, she didn't say a word. She simply stood, handed him the photo, and said coldly, "You're not the only one expecting." His face faltered for the first time. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. Lubna, calling to confirm the time for her checkup tomorrow. The timing was cruelly perfect. Zara's eyes darkened. "You don't need to lie anymore. We've seen each other. At the hospital. Shuista and I. I wonder how many more of us you've comforted with the same story." Omer, cornered, tried to take control. "Zara, please, I only wanted to make each of you feel special," she cut in, laughing bitterly. "You told me this child was a gift from Allah. A miracle. But it's just one of 4, isn't it?" Word spread quickly after that. Zara told Shuista, who confronted Lubna. Halima, innocent and unaware, broke down when she heard the others speaking outside Omer's study. The house became heavy with tears, accusation, and cold glances that once used to be filled with warmth. Omer called a meeting. All 4 wives sat in the same room for the first time in years. He stood before them, no longer confident, no longer in control. He confessed, yes, he knew they were all pregnant, yes, he had told each one what she wanted to hear. But he insisted it was out of love. "I didn't want to hurt anyone. I didn't know how to handle it. I was overwhelmed. I thought maybe it could work." Shuista's voice trembled, but her words cut clean. "You didn't lie to protect us, Omer. You lied to protect your fantasy." Lubna stood up, eyes blazing. "You wanted 4 happy women giving you children like trophies. But we're not ornaments. We're human." Halima, tears rolling down her cheeks, whispered, "I believed you. I thought I was different." The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was personal. Each woman felt robbed of a moment that was supposed to be uniquely hers. And now, the miracle they once held close to their hearts had been stained by manipulation. Omer tried to plead, to fix what was breaking before him. But it was too late. A trust, once fractured, doesn't fall apart all at once. It crumbles quietly under the weight of silence. And now, everything was collapsing. The house wasn't just broken. It had turned into a battlefield of silent grief and shattered illusions. And as Omer stood alone in the doorway, watching them walk away one by one, he finally understood. Sometimes, love isn't about how many hearts you win. It's about how gently you hold the ones you already have. Time has a way of revealing truths that words can't fix. Months passed, and the house that once echoed with shared laughter now carried the distant hum of separation. Each wife moved into her own space, still under Omer's care, but emotionally estranged. They no longer competed for his affection. In fact, they barely spoke to him at all. The children arrived one after another, 2 boys, 2 girls. Omer was present at each birth, but always from a distance. None of the women allowed him inside the delivery room. He waited outside, alone, holding his breath as each new life entered the world. He had dreamed of fatherhood as redemption, but now it felt more like a quiet sentence passed without trial. He tried to reconnect. He brought gifts, sent long messages, even attempted late-night calls. But none of the women responded with anything more than polite detachment. Where there was once warmth, there was now a cautious, civil coldness. They tolerated his presence only for the sake of the children. One evening, with a heavy heart, Omer sat at his desk and wrote 4 letters, one for each wife. In them, he didn't offer excuses. He simply admitted the truth, that he had mistaken control for love and silence for peace. That by trying to give them each everything, he ended up giving them nothing real. To his surprise, they all came together a week later. He found them in the living room, their babies sleeping in a shared crib. For the first time in months, they were unified, not by love for him, but by something stronger. The desire to protect their children from repeating their pain. Dara, the eldest, spoke first. "We're not here to reopen old wounds. We've talked. We've decided." Shuista continued, calm but firm. "We'll co-parent equally, but not as your wives. That chapter is over." Lubna added, "We'll stay in the homes, for the children's stability. But don't expect anything more than respect, not love." And Halima, once the most trusting, said only this, "We believed you. That was our mistake." Omer listened, silent and still. He felt the full weight of his choices. This wasn't punishment, it was consequence. He had sought love in multiples, but failed to nurture even one fully. The room emptied slowly. He walked to the crib and looked at the 4 small faces sleeping peacefully. His legacy? Yes, but also his reckoning. As he stood there, he realized something bitter and beautiful at once. Love can be shared, but trust must be earned. And once broken, it rarely returns unchanged. He was a father now, but no longer a husband. Surrounded by life, yet haunted by loss, Omer finally saw the cost of a love stretched too thin.